By the title, you may have guessed which animal we have chosen for today's assignment. If not, allow us to explain. During our time at the Oxford Natural History Museum, we observed many wonderful and peculiar-looking animals. As we explored through their collection, searching for the most fascinating taxon to research, we were left disappointed. Do we go for the obvious fluffy brown bear upon arrival, or the masses of dinosaur fossils, or the enormous collection of iridescent insects? None of these particularly piqued our interest.
Later in the trip, we were released into Oxford for lunch. While exploring the city, we found our animal. Ignored by most, that inhabit the streets, poorly nesting in gutters and roofs, we chose Columbus, or most commonly known as pigeons. During our research on the taxon of Columbiformes, we discovered that pigeons are in the same family as another animal that intrigued us on the trip, the famous flightless bird, the dodo. This kick-started our research, and this is what we found out.
Pigeons and doves make up the majority of the order Columbiformes. We can define these animals by some of basic characteristics. They have a compact body, relatively small head and neck. These birds have broad wings with rounded edges, and the most important features are the structures of the skull, sternum, and furculum. We can also tell the differences between pigeons and doves. Doves tend to have longer tails and are generally of smaller stature, while pigeons tend to be stubbier and larger.
Comparing this to its evolutionary ancestor, we observe the dodo. The dodo, Raphus cuculatus, was a flightless bird endemic to the islands of Mauritius. They were one of three birds that made up the family Raffidae. The other two species were also found on the islands of the Indian Ocean, were the solitaires. The dodo, larger than a turkey, weighed about 23 kilos. It had a bluish-grey plumage and a 23-centimeter bill with a hooked tip, useless wings, stubby yellow legs, and a tuft of curly feathers on its rear.
Now, where did it all begin? We found out that very little is known about the dodo's ancestry. However, there is research to show that the dodo's closest relative was the Rodriguez solitaire, a large bird that lived on the island of Rodriguez in the Indian Ocean. But that is also extinct. Those two formed their own group, which was equally related to all pigeons. So, there isn't a single living relative the dodo was closest to. Through evolution, dodos adapted to life in Mauritius by nesting on the ground and increasing their size. Their beak adapted to the food they were able to find, and they gradually became flightless. Many island species became flightless and reached larger sizes because they adapt to isolated habitats with reduced competition and few large predators. Unfortunately, these particular adaptations left the dodos ill-prepared for the European sailors and the domestic animals they brought with them when they first arrived in Mauritius.
The first bird in the evolutionary line to fly was the green-spotted pigeon. This bird was dark green with spots of white running along its back, wings, and tail. Its head was the colour of a rusty iron. We can potentially see the evolution of a bird's appearance and how it links to both its recent living relative and its ancestor, the dodo.
Fast forwarding to the present, the Nicobar pigeon is the closest living relative to the dodo bird. The Nicobar pigeon, native to the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands, the Malay archipelago, and some islands of Micronesia, is hailed as one of the most beautiful pigeons in the world. Although they are dissimilar in appearance, both birds are considered island birds.
As we compare these birds, we can see how they all have some similar traits and behaviors. Most species that extend the dodo show a mixture of terrestrial and arboreal traits, often showing a degree of affinity to islands. The differences we can see between the birds are an evolved shorter beak, smaller head, and much more vibrant coloured feathers and the ability to fly. We can assume this evolutionary advantage was due to an increase in competition for food on the ground as well as an increase in larger prey. Due to this evolutionary advantage to fly, we can see the difference in the diversity of each species. The dodo was only one species compared to the 352 species in the family Columbidae.
Consequently, we can tell that the beaks and stature evolve throughout the years it adapts to new food scourges and the ability to fly. Our modern day pigeons are smaller and weigh a lot less than the dodo, in addition to a shorter beak needed to forage for insects and fruits.
To conclude, we knew that the dodo was a challenge to research due to its unfortunate demise. However, we hope this project has been informative. Following this, the dodo's closest relatives were the Rodriguez solitaire and the Nicobar pigeon. Currently, the Nicobar pigeon is the only living relative of the dodo. The evolutionary story of the Columbiformes allow us to compare our modern-day pigeons to the ancient dodo. We can see the adaptations of anatomy, such as the beak, legs, and wings, as well as their digestive methods. This interesting line of evolution has given us a different opinion on the hated pigeon. It's fascinating that the most common, urban-adapted bird evolved from the ancient, famous dodo. Thank you for watching our project. Signing off is Mia,
Poppy.
And Leah.